All right, fantastic. Great to see everybody here. Question for you. Does anybody here have any fears or common phobias? Perhaps you have a fear of spiders?
Yes.
Okay. Arachnophobia? Ooh, I don't know if anybody remember this movie. Maybe a fear of germs? Yeah, that was pretty prevalent a few years ago. A fear of needles, of blood. A fear of heights. That's crazy. A fear of drowning in closed spaces. All very common, very normal, typical fears and phobias. And yet, if you survey people across the world, all cultures, most consistently, the thing people fear the most is a fear of public speaking. If you ask the average person, literally, they would rather die than have to give a speech in public. So I know you all didn't show up tonight because you wanted to be average, though. You're trying to aspire to do something a little bit better and more, even though the typical person would be afraid to even attempt to do something. If you do have any very normal fear or anxiety about giving a talk, though, I want to reassure you, think about it rationally. What is the worst that could happen?
You get stoned to death?
Well, maybe get stoned to death. Hasn't happened yet. This is a picture from my PhD thesis defense many years ago. I know, I look like a kid. I totally don't fill the suit out. But a full suit and tie I wore nonetheless on a warm summer day. This is back in Orange County, UC Irvine. And I did a tour de force review of 5 years of my scientific research. I gave an hour-long talk, and I did it all within 30 minutes. Because a very common issue I have, still to this day, is I start talking really fast when I feel I'm being under pressure. Everybody's staring at me, I'm going to talk really fast so I can get this done, get out of here as quickly as possible. But nonetheless, I got through it. I showed all my cool science. Made it. Got to the Q&A session when my committee members started hammering me. Jonathan, that was cool, but why did you do this? Why did you do that? What about this issue? What about that issue? You didn't talk about this. I'm trying to engage and address these questions, and it's starting to feel a little funny. I'm starting to feel a little warm. My ears start ringing. I'm starting to see spots. I know what this feeling is because I've had it before. I'm about to pass out. What's also really annoying is I also know this is a vasovagal reaction. This thing where if I could just lie down for 5 minutes, I'd be totally fine. It would just pass. But the thing is, I'm in the middle of like my entire thesis committee right now. Also, all my colleagues and friends there. There's my wife standing in that corner. There's my mom standing in that corner. I can just can you all wait for 5 minutes while I lie down? So no. I will just have to power through this and just keep on going. However, I'm not feeling so good though. So if y'all could just give me just 1 second. What I was told happened next is that I start to sweat. I start to wobble. And apparently as this is happening, that committee member who's grilling me, he looks at me and says, I withdraw my question. I don't remember this. I don't remember any of this because I literally passed out onto the floor in front of everybody. The next thing I remember was people were lifting up my legs, they were taking off my tie. What is going on? What's happening? Whoa! No, wait, what? No, it's fine, it's fine. I did not spend 5 years of my PhD to end up like this, to culminate. This is not how things were supposed to go. We can still do this. Let's just go back. Let's just keep going. Of course not. It was over. The broader point, what's the point am I telling you this story for? After all this shameful spectacle I had to endure, what do you think happened next?
You got your PhD.
I got my PhD! Yes! I passed! It was fine. Nobody died. We all went on with our life. It was okay. Other than I had to live through that moment. If that's some of the worst that could happen, right? What's the worst that could happen? You think you could do worse than passing out onto the floor in front of everybody? I think you're gonna do better than that. I don't think you're gonna get stoned either, depending on what you're talking about. If that's some of the worst that could happen to you, what's the best that could happen to you if you take the time to get really good and do deliberate effort to get better at your presentations? Something that surprised me is how often I've given a talk at a conference or somewhere, and very often it turns out you are interviewing for a job you don't realize with someone in the audience who you don't know for a job you don't even know exists. It turns out you're very often interviewing for a job you don't even know exists. So what is it, like Columbia, Vanderbilt, University of Pittsburgh, University of Washington, UCSF, and of course Stanford. I never cold applied for any of these jobs. In every case, what happened was I was just giving a talk at a conference. Here's my cool science. I think it's really cool. I want to share with you because I think it's really great. And then someone approached me after the fact. Wow, that was great. That was super cool. Is this the stuff you work on? That's cool. Did you know we have a faculty job opening right now? You should apply for this right now. I'm going to go email my department chair so he knows about you. Oh, okay. It's not like I was seeking this person out. I was just enthusiastically sharing the stuff I was excited by. Let alone now, if you do a good talk, people will invite you to do the next one and the next one. And now, literally, I've been paid over $10,000 just to give a lecture, which is kind of crazy, but it's because I spent a lot of effort trying to make it good and worthwhile. Consider where that goes there. Something that may surprise you. When I first prepared a version of this presentation, this workshop, what did the other faculty, Dennis Wallace? Oh yeah, Jonathan, you're so good at presentations. Of course. It's so easy for you, Jonathan. Of course you should give a presentation on how to give a talk. I was like, what? That's not true. That is not true at all. This is not easy for me. This is a huge amount of work. I'm very naturally an introverted computer nerd. I'm much more comfortable playing video games and programming code. It's actually very emotionally draining for me to engage with people. Not because it's not good. I like it. It's just it requires a lot of emotional energy to do it well. The first time I had to give a presentation, I don't know about you guys, it was a college class, right? It was an anthropology class. Okay, everyone give a little presentation about what you read in the chapter. I was like, I'm a smart guy. How hard could this be? I read the chapter of the book. I'll just go to the podium and I'll just talk about what I read. After 2 minutes, I ran out of stuff to say. What am I supposed to do now? I sort of laughed and chuckled at my own jokes, and I sort of mumbled my way through some. And then afterwards, I just sort of slunk off the stage. Like, it's so cringeworthy. Like, oh my gosh, that was terrible. That was terrible. I could never allow that to happen again. So after that experience, notwithstanding I was 13 years old at the time, but the next time I had to give a talk, I didn't just wing it and just like I figured it out on the spot. It's like, no, I prepared like an outline. I had like note cards. This was before the era of PowerPoint. So I have a framework to think of what I would cover. I video recorded myself and I watched and rewatched it multiple times. And boy, is it good I did that, because the first recording was terrible. I couldn't even complete 2 sentences without going, I don't know what to say. But having gone through that iteration, by the 10th time, I can do it. I'm ready for this. Yeah. All right. There is no talent. There are only those who put in the hard work. For this session today, just today, it's not even going to be half an hour, by the way. How long do you think I spent preparing for this presentation? I've spent over 20 hours preparing this presentation. Does that seem crazy to you? Does that seem insane?
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's insane, right? Think about it this way. What is your most important resource? It's not your money. It's not your money. Yeah, you can replace money. It's your time and your youth. Once it's gone, it's gone. It ain't coming back. Right now, you are literally giving me the gift of a half hour, an hour of your life that you will not get back, right? I have literally given talks, and you will too, in front of hundreds of people. Effectively, they're giving you hundreds of hours of their professional time in their life that they will not get back. Boy, is it worth it, I think, to spend a fraction of that to produce and deliver a compelling talk, to make it worth everybody's time. Even though we tend to seem like just get revenge on each other by wasting each other's time with bad presentations, seems to be the norm. It really maybe doesn't have to be that way. So hopefully you get a sense of that's some of the why to motivate you, why it's worth doing. But what is a good talk anyway? What's the purpose? What's the purpose of a good talk, a presentation? Most people think the purpose of a talk is to inform the audience. That is totally not the primary point. If you just want to transmit information, here you go, guys. You can go to the QR code preprint. Here's a printout of like 10 simple rules for a good presentation. If you could just hand that around and just read that for the next 20 minutes, we'll sit quietly while you read. You don't do that, right? That would make no sense. That would be a much more efficient way to transmit information. Just email a file out, hand out, everybody just sit quietly and read. You don't do that. You do want to inform people. Actually, the point of a talk, it's a different medium, it's a different channel. You want to inform, but you also want to inspire people to care about the why. Why should they care? Why should they want to read that document? And then influence them to follow up and actually do something. Read your paper, call you for a collaboration, offer you a job, or wherever it may be the next opportunity. So I'm going to inspire you all to consider like why it's worth it for you to spend that time to get better at giving presentations is a huge amplifying effect in your career. There are people who, if you don't get good at this, you'll be fine, but your life could have been 2x better if you just spend the time to do this. And it is accessible. It's not crazy. There are skills that you can develop. Inform you with some of those techniques and hopefully influence you to spend that time. Not think 20 hours is crazy if you want to be really good at something. And for what it's worth, I've given this talk now because think about the meta pressure of giving this presentation, by the way. I'm giving you a talk on how to give a good talk. Holy smokes, I better do a good job, right? I've often seen people give talk and give a talk, I'm like, wow, this person's not a very good speaker. This is very ironic. It doesn't make sense. But I put in that 20 hours plus an effort to make it good, and now I've been invited to do this over and over again because, oh, people see it's valuable. Now that 20 hours is split across 6-7 times. Now it's not so crazy, right? Arguably, that was a better use of my time to make it as good as possible. Okay, so that's some of the why and the what. Let's talk about some of the how. Some techniques you might consider. If you've ever seen a presentation before, you'll see 90% of the time people tend to start like this. And you notice very specifically, I did not start my presentation like this. I started with an icebreaker. I got to know you, to warm up, hang out. I'm a human being. What I did not do is say, hello, my name is Jonathan Chen. I'm from the Stanford Center for Biomedical Informatics Research. Today's talk will be delivering compelling talks, why, what, and how. You're laughing at me, right? Right? Have you ever seen something like this? And I'm thinking, yo, dude, I can read. Like, you should get on with it. Think about the last blockbuster movie you saw or your favorite TV show. How does it start? It starts with like title card, roll credits. No, it does not. What it does, it starts with a cold open, a blockbuster action or dramatic scene to immediately draw you in. And then once you're hooked, then they'll move on to the exposition, the plot, once you're actually bought into it. Right? Reading your slide, let alone reading anything, is really the opposite of an arresting opening to kind of bring you into the moment. So some techniques you might use, right? And if you can't do a magic trick, then in the meantime, still you could ask a provocative question. What are you afraid of? Very often, a very effective technique is to start with a narrative story to illustrate a specific content, perhaps a personal anecdote that humanizes the speaker and allows the audience to better empathize with the content to come. Actually, not that hard to do, just tell a good story is a very good way to get things going. A problem in the world. Having said all this, all these techniques we're talking about, realize does not overcome good content, right? Your content is really what matters, right? If you do science, if you do technology, if you do business, whatever you do, that you have to actually do the good underlying work. This is conditional. Having done that good work, I assume you guys are doing good work. How do you express and communicate that so that people know about it? Because if you don't, what's the point? What's the point if you do all the good work if nobody can understand what you did and don't really appreciate what you've done? But if you haven't done that good work, all these cool, flashy techniques, it's not going to save you. It's not going to save you. You have this turd of a content. You can shine and polish that up as much as you want, and you'll have a very nice and shiny turd at the end, but like a turd, it will remain. So just realize, I'm telling you techniques, but still your content of what you do is still primarily important. So some pragmatic tips. How do you, if you don't know how to make a good presentation, I bet you can spot a good one and a bad one, yeah? How many lectures and seminars have you been to like, this is bad? Or you don't even think that, you just go back to your email. You go back to your Facebook, I don't even know what, you stop paying attention, right? But versus a good one, like, this is cool, you're engaging, you're paying attention, right? I bet you can spot the difference. So some techniques you could use, one of my students recommended this one, Susan McConnell, she was a Stanford professor. She just breaks down very nuts and bolts kind of stuff. Here's how you do your slides, here's what kind of font, here's what kind of colors, and that's fine. Nuts and bolts stuff. The reality is a lot of people do this very badly too, so it's worth learning those nuts and bolts. But I want to start thinking about broader impacts as well. An example. Here's a slide of my research, copyright my abstract. It's fantastic, it's really good. Wait, what? Why are you laughing again? Right? If you ever present a slide like this, you are fired. You are fired. However, I say that I would never present a slide like this, but I make slides like this all the time. All the time. Right? There's a different in the composition phase, the brainstorm creative phase. I just copy and paste it down, scribble something, and just organize your thoughts. It's okay to have that. Just don't show this, right? Often what people get to next is like, okay, wait, this is too much information, right? Even though this came from our literal research paper, this was the abstract, essentially. They say, well, I'll reorganize it. Here we go. That's like a good slide, yeah? You got some bullet points, you got some key numbers, a supporting figure. Most people are probably going to present something like this, and that's okay. I'm not going to fire you if you present something like this, but I think you can still do better. There's still essentially full sentences. You can't help it. You're starting to read. You're starting to read. You didn't listen to the last 5 words I said because you can't process reading and listening at the same time. Now this is a perfect example of, oh, I know, data. I gotta prove how hard, look at all the data I made in my study. Look, I've been working so hard. I'm a serious scientist. So people don't know what it presents, so it's just giant data dump. And look, your eyes glaze over. Oh my gosh. You don't even know what to look at. I've seen this done so often in many settings. Really speaks to the speaker just didn't even think about it. They had no idea what to do. And unfortunately, it's very common. All right, here's a concrete example. Not that this is the best thing, but this is a very real slide that I've presented many times in front of, million-dollar donors, hundreds of physicians and scientists in many ways. So example, I'm gonna present this as if I'm presenting this at a scientific conference. We did a study on how well doctors can perform on complex diagnostic reasoning exam studies, but we wanted to see what the impacts are of emerging AI, chatbot, large language model tools. So we had diagnostic reading cases, randomized control study. We had doctors that we said, you can access anything on the internet. You can go to UpToDate, Google, look up anything you want, just don't talk to a chatbot, large language model AI system. And this is their score distribution on this very complex, difficult test. Very difficult to beat. We randomized the other half of doctors. They were given access to GPT-4, this essentially the version of ChatGPT. Strangely, they did not do all that much better. This is really surprising because it turns out if you just ask GPT-4 by itself, it actually outscores all of the doctors. Including the doctors who had access to GPT-4. Like, what is going on here? This really seems to fly in the face of the fundamental theorem of informatics. Human plus computer, when combined, will deliver better results than either alone. It sounds so good, doesn't it? I used to say that all the time at the end of my talks. I don't say that anymore because I'm not sure anymore. Because boy, does that human in the loop in the middle kind of seems to be slowing the computer down and maybe get out of the way and let the robot take over. Is that what this means? I actually don't think that's what it means. I think it actually means about training and disruptive technology and adapting to it. Okay, so now I'm done. That's how I kind of present that in that way. If you want to talk about the research, I can, but that's not the point. I want to, did you notice very multiple techniques I used when I did that presentation, right? I do have a very thin bullet points, but there's no sentences. I don't really want you to read this, but someone's going to ask, wait, how many cases, how many patients, how many, where? It's there if you want to know. Here's a link to the archive paper. If you want the full details, it's all there. I'm not hiding anything. I'm not glossing it over. For those engaged, go ahead and look at the full detail. It's just in this medium, it doesn't make sense to read the entire paper to you. Other things I use, right? I did not show all the data at one time. I showed one thing at a time. Now that you got it, now let's show the next thing. Because I'm trying to draw your attention to an illustrative comparative point. If you just drop all the data, people don't know what they're supposed to look at. What's the point? A couple other things that you notice. I didn't stand behind the podium. Right? This is very instinctively, you want to hide behind the podium. No, your slides are not the show. You are the show. I'm literally going to stand right in front of here because you're simply paying attention to me and right where I point to draw your attention where you want it to go. Some other, and also I set up essentially a punchline, a joke. There's this result, like 1, 2, 3, rule of 3, and then 3, bam, surprise you. That wasn't what you expected, right? Sets up that punchline about where you can go with it. Anybody notice any other techniques I use? Just think about that. Maybe you can tell that seemed good, that seemed bad, but take it to the next level, like why was that good and why was that bad, so you can articulate that and use it towards what you're doing. I'll give you also another illustration of, the next slide here. This is a screenshot of actually what it looks like in my PowerPoint. So there's a slide. Here's all like that abstract of the paper. You spend all the time writing, it's okay, just don't put it on the slide. Put it in your notes section so you don't lose it. It helps you organize your thoughts. And then eventually, you don't have to do this. For talks I care about, I do essentially kind of script the entire thing. Not obsessively, it's not like I'm mincing every particular word. It depends. I just gave a talk at a big kind of donor event a couple weeks ago, and they gave me 5 minutes. 5 minutes is incredibly short, and I had to give a 10-minute presentation in 5 minutes. Then I really did script every single word just because you have to be very precise, otherwise you're going to go over time. Usually you're not under that extreme of pressure. I do this not because I'm going to memorize the whole thing, not because I need to, but it just helps to when you're writing, you can debug, that sentence doesn't make sense. That sentence doesn't connect them. Where's the transition? It just makes it a little more clear. Then I can mix and match and move it around. It's just easier in a written form. You don't have to do that. Some people just record themselves. That didn't go that well. Let me watch the recording. That didn't quite fit. Let me try it again. And just repeat iterations. That can be good enough too. But if your talk's long enough, it's hard to memorize everything in your recording. I find it helpful to just jot some notes. And although you can do it, I recommend not depending on this by having this on presenter view so I can see it at the same time and what was I going to say. You can do that. I kind of bold a couple phrases. I don't have time to read a sentence. Don't like, here's a screenshot of that same slide, but you're like, you don't want me to do that, right? But oh, I'm supposed to mention the notes section. That's enough to cue. I can remind me what to do. Sometimes it also does help because most of the time you know your content. You're an expert in your own stuff. Once you're in the middle of it, you should script the first 2 sentences of your talk and the last 2 sentences, so it's very sharp. The middle, you'll just know your stuff. You'll be able to talk about it. Having said that, some things like, I think this result flies in the face of the fundamental theorem of informatics. I definitely did not make up that on the spot. I just think that's a very cool phrase and it sounds kind of nice and it's very evocative. That one I scripted, I want to make sure I get to that particular thing. All right, I'm going to keep going. The broader point, if you haven't, I encourage you to watch this. This is a really fun, entertaining, but interesting and informative TED Talk here about how to avoid death by PowerPoint. Pervasive problem in academic corporate setting. People bomb you with this data dump, 100 bullet points, and you're just like, oh, you're just like stunned, and then you just tune out and just like you forget everything, right? He has some broad principles. No more than 6 things per slide. No whole sentences anyway. Only 1 idea per slide. But even more, I'm not going to go on about this anymore because the bigger point is, again, your slides are not the show. You are the show. You are the presentation. If the slides were the show, just email the file and just go home. What are you here for? No, it's a very different connection to medium. You want to feel like we're having a conversation, and that's what people will engage more. You don't want to listen to a lecture. Who wants to listen to a lecture? It's tedious. Looking for inspiration. I very much, I don't look at scientists and doctors give talks for inspiration because actually most of them are really bad. I don't mean like, it could be bad. I mean like they're really bad. The vast majority are really bad. Go watch Neil deGrasse Tyson's masterclass. This is exceptionally well done. I think I actually have a login to it. If you want, email me later and I can get it to you. It's just exceptionally well done. Go watch a stand-up comedian tell a good story. Watch like Dave Chappelle like tell a story. Like listen not just to the words, but to the voice. Watch not just the mouth, but the facial expressions, the hand gestures, the body movement. There's no accident what's happening. It's very deliberate techniques being used if you pay attention, and it really pops. This was probably the best, one of the best presentations I've seen about public speaking. This is a stage magician, Vin Yang, and he talks about how he's able to, not nice word, it's almost like manipulating people's attention basically. And a magician really understands what you pay attention to, what you don't, and what they have to do to get you to look at what they want and get you to think what they want. There's actually a lot of empathy involved. If I do this, you must be thinking that. If I do that, you're thinking there's a thing in my pocket. If I do that, you're thinking there's something wrong with the card, right? It articulates what's going on. You have to anticipate what people are thinking about. This is great. It's actually super entertaining. I encourage you to watch this one. Again, though, the broader point is, you'll notice all of these last 3 examples, they don't have slides at all. It's just a person and a microphone. That's it. That's it. And they're absolutely engaging and compelling. You're listening to every word. You're actually learning a ton. Because you want to talk with your audience. It should feel like we're having a conversation. Even though it's hard to have a conversation with 20 people at the same time. Don't talk to your slides. How often have you seen this? Have you seen this? I've seen full faculty, let alone students, who for a whole hour, they stand at the podium and they're talking to their computer the entire time. Like, dude, do I have to be here? I mean, like, why am I even here for? You might as well just send out a file. To make some of that work better, you also really need to know your audience. This is hard, but it's a key technique. You have your basis, your framework, but ideally you know, I looked you guys up before I came here, right? What is this organization? What's your training level? What kind of experience will they have? What are you probably going to care about? What are your biases? What is your background? What's your level? So that I can imagine more, how do I make it tailored to something that you're going to care about? Right, I've given presentations to high school girls interested in STEM. What is this one? Oh, Stanford alumni, like 70-year-old, like old business leaders. Undergraduates, computational grad students, and rooms full of hundreds of standing room only physicians. You can fairly assume, everyone's very smart and bright and very eager. And they all showed up. They actually are on your side. They didn't want to show up and hear something lame or something that made no sense. They're really hoping you're going to do a good job. They're on your side. But you have to assume they're skeptical. They're not going to let you get away with nonsense, right? You have to really bring some substance. But if you do, they will be so excited to do it. Another key facet when you see this is, especially if you do complex technical topics or interdisciplinary work, you have to assume half of the audience is not an expert in your field. This is a very common mistake students make. They immediately jump to all the jargon, all the technical words. Well, this transformer-based technology using the attention mechanism illustrated a certain hallucination, right? They jump straight to that. You can do that if you explain, but don't jump to that. People often do that because they feel like, I need to prove I'm smart. I need to prove I'm an expert so that they'll take me seriously. Actually, this will be harsh. It actually demonstrates your mediocrity when you explain something with jargon. It means you don't really understand the way people process a complex subject. And if you do the interdisciplinary work, half your audience is not an expert. That half may change minute to minute, but at any time, if you get everybody up to the same level, they will love you. They will love you. Even the people who already know it, I know that technical term. Wow, he explained that. She explained that pretty well. That was really cool. And I feel smart because I already knew that. And I can see these other people, they're coming along for the ride too. Wow, that's great. They really will love you. You're going to feel like, oh no, I'm dumbing it down. Don't dumb it down. Just start at the basics and build up to where you need to get to go. So let's see. I'm going to try how do you do that? Techniques to do that, right? Tell a story. Use concrete examples. Don't say, here's a math equation. This shows that this is how things work. It's like, for one thing, you should almost never show a math equation. But okay, to make it concrete, here's X leads to Y. X could be your blood pressure. Y could be whether you have a heart attack. And that's the probability that one affects the other. Now, okay, it's getting more concrete. So, concrete example of knowing your audience. I'm going to do something very experimentally. There's a high chance this is going to fail, but indulge me. We're gonna try to have some fun here. I'm gonna do something here with ChatGPT. Mind typing here. Let's see if you can do a mind reading effect around visualizing images. Hopefully the internet works. Okay. Very good. So, for example, what was your name again? Leslie, could you just describe an image like a dog blowing out birthday candles or like turkey watching Thanksgiving dinner? It doesn't matter. There's something random. Like I'm clear that I couldn't have prepared it.
There's a big mushroom that is coming from your head.
Okay, sure, we'll take it. A big mushroom from your head. Just as an illustration of it, you just think of something random, right? Everybody, who knows what the audience is thinking? Everyone can try to play along with this. This may not work, but let's give it a try. Let's everybody just think of something else. Think of something else. Can you think of a dessert food you might eat? You know, like don't think of like tiramisu or something fancy at a restaurant. Just a very common dessert food that anybody might have in their home right now. You know, like ice cream or Jell-O. Okay, you were thinking of ice cream. Okay, so don't think of ice cream or Jell-O because I just said that. Some other dessert food anybody might have in their home right now. Got it? Can you now think of the last letter of your dessert food? And can you think of a breakfast food that starts with that letter? Okay. Can you take your breakfast food, take the second letter of your breakfast food, and can you think of a musical instrument? Got one? Now your musical instrument, can you take the second, let's take the third. Take the third letter of your musical instrument, and can you think of a color? It's a color. Maybe nothing too obvious. You remember those Crayola crayons, all those different options? Can you think of a color? The third letter of your musical instrument. I don't know. ChatGPT, I need some help here. Let's see what I got. I'll do a quick test. I don't know if the audio will work, but if not, I'll just type it. She was thinking of a mushroom coming out of her head, and also while playing a musical instrument. Can you create an image of what they're thinking of? Processing. I really don't know what's going to happen. But, well, sometimes if you're not willing to accept the possibility of failure, you don't give yourself too many chances to succeed either.
Described a person with a mushroom growing out of their head, playing a musical instrument. As I visualized their thoughts, I felt compelled to include an indigo-colored guitar. It just seemed to align perfectly with their inner vision. What do you think?
Does that mean anything to anybody? An indigo guitar?
Well, I did think of indigo. That was my color.
There you go. Okay, well, someone fall. I'm like, how did I do that? How did I know you were thinking of indigo? Did I read your mind? I did not. I did not, right? What I did is I present information in a very specific and deliberate sequence such that you can't help it. You can't help it but arrive at that conclusion, right? You're presenting a scientific study. It's like, here's some data, here's some figures, I hope you like it. Like, no, you have to present it in a very specific order. You really want to kind of mind control the person so they can't help it but arrive at the conclusion you want. You don't just randomly throw up, like, I don't know, what do you guys think? Is this good or not? All right, next phase of where we're going. These are some other examples along the way. So a key, much different topic, how do you handle Q&A? This is almost more like you need like improv acting classes. It's actually really, really hard to do Q&A, usually at more advanced skill as you progress through your training. Because it's hard enough to know your talk. You practice so, you memorize, you stand in front of the mirror or the camera, but Q&A, you kind of can't practice it unless you have another person to kind of bounce it off of, right? Because who knows what they're going to bring up in kind of a weird situation. So how should you do that? One is, ideally, how do you have a robust, strong answer for what people ask you? What you do is you spend most of your time not tweaking your slides. You're going to spend so much time tweaking your slides, like stop that. Do that for a bit, and then spend a big chunk of your practice time on like, what are the 5 most likely things I would get asked at the end of this talk? What are the 3 toughest, nastiest things I could get asked at the end of this talk? And then anticipate what your response would be in that situation and see how it flows. Right? Ideally, the best way you're prepared is no matter what anybody asks, you've thought about it, you're ready to go, bam, the answer is this, we use this methodology, we did this follow-up study, and this was the result. Ideally, that would be the case, but it's also hard to prepare for every possible situation. It becomes a choose-your-own-adventure kind of situation, right? There's a situation, I didn't prepare this specific one, where you could ask somebody, hey, can you think of a playing card, like in a deck of cards? Think of any card you want. And it turns out that most people will say the Queen of Hearts. And if somebody did, I go, that's amazing, because right in my pocket I have the Queen of Hearts, right? If they don't say that, it turns out the second most common thing they say is the Ace of Spades. So somebody said Ace of Spades, like, that's amazing, because right here in my pocket I had the Ace of Spades, right? But of course you don't tell people that you got like the Queen of Hearts in one pocket, the Ace of Spades in another pocket. It's just, you're prepared 20 different ways, 10 times more than the actual talk, and whatever somebody says, you just bring out the response that you prepared for, and it looks so natural. It looks so spontaneous, even though that's the exact opposite of what it is. What it is a stupid amount of preparation for all these possibilities that you will never, most of them you'll never run into, but then when it happens, it just looks so spontaneous. That's when you look really like a professional, like, wow, this person really knows their stuff. It's actually just that you took the time to think about it. You empathize with what you thought the audience would be. It's like choose your own adventure. In magic, it's called multiple outs. No matter what somebody says, you've got a few different things you can do, and it looks like it just worked perfectly, even though what it was is they were waiting for to see how you would react. Right? You kind of navigate the script with this if-then logic. If they say this, I'll do that. If they say this, I'll bring this in. A broader point, realize that you control the script. All right? No apologies. Because one thing, no one really cares, also nobody knows if something goes off, right? You're just like, you're the director of a stage play in real life, where you have your script, your plan. If things go a little bit off, you can improv and jazzle to kind of get back on track and reorient. If somebody really laughs hard here, or they look really unhappy over here, I'm actually really like watching your faces as I go to kind of navigate what's hitting and what's not, so I can adjust as it happens. In comparison to what you're not doing. Have you ever seen this before? And then here's my oh shoot, that formula didn't come out right. Oh, whoa, that is way too small. You totally can't read that. This is not what it looked like, when I looked at this morning. I'll fix that later. And I see this, I'm like, why are you pointing this out? Nobody cares, and nobody knows. Nobody knows there's a mistake. It's actually a technique I use in magic is, if you mess something up or things go a little bit off, the specter to grab something they're not supposed to grab, you just keep going. They had no idea what the end effect was. They had no idea where you were going. So you walk right past it. Nobody realizes anything was off. You control the script. You navigate where you want to go. Okay, here's an advanced level. This is kind of my final thought technique. Don't ever ask, did I answer your question? You've seen this dialogue a lot, haven't you? Right? Because if you do that, what are the 2 possibilities? One is you answer the question and you're just wasting airtime. And 2 is no, you have not answered the question, and you're stuck even more cornered in this awkward situation. Steve Ash gave me something. He was one of my mentors, gave me a really strong advice here. He said a few things. So if somebody asks you a tough question, how do you deal with it? If somebody asks you a bizarre question, how do you deal with it? Sometimes that happens too. People, they want to get their own social commentary. It has nothing to do with what you're presenting. The ideal is you prepared every possible answer. You've thought of all the things, and you're ready with a sharp answer for everything. That would be great, but eventually someone could just ask you something just bizarre or off the wall, and you can't reasonably have an answer to it. So one undergrad level of skill, you should say, that's a good question. I'm actually not sure about the answer, but worth thinking about. I don't know. That's actually a good thing. That's better than like bluffing your way through and making up BS. People totally will detect it, and it'll make them angry when they can tell you're just making stuff up. Graduate, master's level of skill, say, nobody knows the answer to that yet. That's a great question. But here's my working hypothesis is I bet it's going to be this. We're doing a follow-up study that would be able to answer that question. I would love to chat with you after the session and we can engage more further on it. It's good. Much more engaging, thoughtful, deliberate answer. You should probably default that. Fellow level skill, junior faculty skill. Someone's hammering something really nasty or weird, just bizarre. The question doesn't even make sense. How do you handle it? And they won't stop, basically. You handle do you notice how a politician handles a hostile journalist? You just ignore the question. They just stay on message. You answer your own question. You just make up another question you'd rather answer instead. Well, that's a very interesting question about X. No one really has a good answer to that one. But you know what it does remind me of? We studied the theory of Y, and it's actually really quite compelling. We found these really interesting results. It really offers these different insights, and we really should talk about that one more. Right? Really weird thing. People have a very short attention span. If you just say something intelligent for a minute, they just forget what the question was. They don't even remember what the question was asked. So remind them, did that answer your question? Like, yeah, why would you remind them? Just break eye contact with the person. Just move on. Next question, please. Advanced technique. It can backfire if you do it in a hostile way, but when you're ready for it, it's quite powerful. All right, I'm gonna close out the body here. Right, we could talk about 30 more things that'd be worth talking about, but the broader point is I didn't want to tell you everything. That's not the point of this. The real point is you are all smart adults here, right? I don't need to inform you about everything. What am I need to do? I need to inspire you to care that it is worth your time to get better at this, and then influence you to follow up, do some of that practice, do some study, do some iterations, and you'll get better at it on your own. Right? Because remember, you're not supposed to realize, don't tweak your slides all day, because the point is, no, you should be talking with your audience, not to your slides. Don't ever ask, did I answer your question? You control the script. Nobody else does. You can direct where things go. Right? Remember, it's not talent. It is only who put in the hard work. Teller of Penn and Teller's famous magic duo had this fantastic quote. I really love it. He said, "Often magic is just someone who spent way more time on something than anyone might reasonably expect." So that I'll close it out, and very much looking forward to being inspired by your next presentations. Thank you, everybody. I'll allude briefly to just one other side technique at the end. You'll notice I also deliberately, this is my last slide that I leave online. Very often people just look at their last slide. Thank you, acknowledgements, whatever, that's kind of useless. You can have that, acknowledge whoever, but leave something like a little outline of what your talk was. And that'll remind people, oh, I had a question. I was going to ask about this, but I can't remember what you said. Like, oh yeah, you said something about informed influence, and they'll give them a follow-up. Again, you have a lot of subliminal control on where you want to direct people's attention to. Here's also several more examples of the talks that I watched that gave me ideas and inspiration on how to work the line. We'll break from there. We can take questions if you like. I find that this topic isn't really a question and answer type of topic, but I might turn it back to you. What is a great talk you've seen, and what techniques did you notice that the speaker used? Like, that was great, that was cool, I thought that worked really well, and how might you incorporate that into your own presentations? Anybody have a thought of that? Although I'm just calling on people. Oh, go ahead, Leslie.
Someone was hearing me give a practice talk and told me that I was really nervous, so they shared with me a YouTube video of this faculty at Stanford Graduate School of Business who I think
Matt Abrams.
Yeah, and I think he gives a lot of talks about this, and it's also on YouTube if people are interested. But he introduced a lot of techniques, including using improv and getting to know your audience, as you mentioned, and just not being nervous and getting past that. And there are a lot of like improv techniques to help you like not get nervous.
I see. What are some of the techniques? I've heard about it. I've never taken an improv class. I actually don't know.
There's a technique where you like point to like different things in a room and you just like shout the thing that it's not in, like that could be tree and that is.
Yes, being
Well,
comfortable with
or
saying
like-
something that doesn't make sense
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Very good. Or again, just practice iterations. Get your friend, get your roommate, and say, "Hey, can I just practice in front of you?" You don't even have to pay attention. Right? I just need to practice in front of a person, and that can help that iteration. And also, why I remember I started with, "Hey, what's the worst that can happen? Like nobody's gonna die." And for what it's worth, I actually still get very nervous. I still get stage fright all the time. It's weird. I did my first magic competition years ago. It's like whatever. I've given talks for hundreds of people in scientific context, and then I'm like at a local like magic club doing a magic trick, and like my hands are shaking. Like, oh my gosh, like what is wrong with me? It's a normal human reaction. Like that's okay. And march through it. I stepped aside to like the stairwell, took a few deep breaths, and tried to compose myself. And all reasonable things to do. What do you say? What have you seen that works very well?
Well, actually, I follow quite a bit of news talk. Okay?
Yeah.
So for me, he really inspired me.
Yeah.
I just share with you
Yeah.
how I feel. The key is, he's a scientist,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But he translated those very complicated research results and concepts and
Mhm.
to the layman language. And communicated so well. And then the message he delivered and the technique he delivered his message is so inspiring.
Yeah.
And people can follow his talk so well.
It is
That's why it's
shockingly powerful
Yeah. Mhm.
when you're able to do that. It really actually shows your expertise, and it lets you have an impact and a reach far beyond. Anybody else want to see just a comment? Otherwise, I'll just describe some other anecdotes. That's another technique. Have a question prepared for yourself, so in case nobody has questions, you don't have to sit there silently and initiate the next conversation.
Well, what I did for my PhD dissertation,
Mhm.
okay, I did not pass out, but I was shaking a little bit. But when I prepared, I said, well, I'm the person knows the subject matter
absolutely.
the best.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, all my audience, I'm talking about before that, and my committee, they heard a story from me, but they didn't know all of the details. So during the presentation, I believe they can follow my talk,
Mhm.
but a lot of things I think I know more than they do. So I have that kind of the,
Yeah.
confidence. But when you're standing up there,
It's still hard. It's very uncomfortable. Right now, you all feel very actually passive. You're watching, but if you stand up here and you see 30 faces looking at you, it's instantly uncomfortable. It's a very human instinct and reaction, and that's okay. That actually just means you care. You think this is worth doing a good job at, and lean into that, and that can work well.
no, I believe these days you guys are much better than I was. Okay.
Now they're posting like TikTok videos or something. They're used to like getting their face out there.
Oh, I was gonna say that one of the most memorable talks that I've seen was one of the Stanford biology professor's job talk, Jan Scotham.
Okay.
He's kind of more a systems biology
Yeah.
person, kind of using yeast systems to count things, and he just like, it was almost like a Chalk Talk Live.
Yeah.
No prepared slides. He literally had like almost like an overhead situation,
Uh-huh,
like back in the day with the overhead,
yeah.
but he drew
Cool.
images
Yeah.
and concepts, but
So interactive.
but the
right?
whole point was he distilled down very difficult concepts into
Yeah.
simple
So powerful.
physics type of, very simple equations,
Yeah.
and then just like did, what is it, like 10 years of research in that, and that was his job talk, and I thought it was just like
Very cool.
super memorable.
Years ago, when I had to give my job talk, I was asking my advisor, Russ Altman, like, "Oh, Russ, well now it's my job talk. I can't just I can't be my fun, usual self. I try to be fun while also being scientific. I better be serious and show some math equations and show like I'm very methodologically rigorous." And somebody's like, no, you should be serious, you should be good, but no, you should actually still be engaging and communicate that. He said, if as a faculty, if you can get the students excited and understand on board, then boy do you win in that case. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I really felt like I had permission to do that. Like, I had an example where I cited like a game show in my talk about recommender algorithms. Like, oh, I probably shouldn't do that in my job talk. They're going to think I'm a joke. And then he gave me the reassurance, like, no, that's just a communication technique. I think I saw a hand, but let me articulate one example that Neil deGrasse Tyson used that I thought is just illustrative of it. he describes like, hey, what is the shape of the Earth? A globe. It's a sphere, right? It's a sphere. That's the shape of it. That's actually not true. Because of the Earth's spin, it's a little bit stretched out. It's a little bit elongated. It's kind of like a hot dog. That's actually not really true either, because the bottom of it is a little more flat. It's a little more hamburger shaped. The top half is a little more stretched. So it's really more of an oblate spheroid. The broader point he's making is, what if he said, what's the shape of the Earth? It's a sphere. Is he wrong? Is he lying? Why don't you tell the real information? It's like, no, you're describing it at a level of approximation that matches what the audience needs. But start at that level and dig a little deeper. Actually, it's a little more elongated sphere. Actually, it's more of an oblate spheroid. But also, you don't jump straight to, what's the Earth? It's an oblate spheroid. What the heck are you talking about? That makes no sense, right? And so you kind of build it up from simple concepts, and you go as deep as you need to reach the audience and reach the goals you have. It's, again, very, very powerful technique. Was there a hand back here? Ever your thought? Oh no, weird. What you think works well? What doesn't? What's
I think the most like impactful talks I see is when the presenter like shows why I should care. Like usually at the beginning they would connect their talk with some kind of small stories of usually your everyday life, like the car you drive, the phone you use.
Good.
And just why I should care about this research.
Yeah. It's kind of the scripting, right? Inspire first, get them to care. If that actually is most of the job of the talk. Some information you transmit, but the reality is it's going to be really hard for you to remember more than 3 things I said at the end of this. Even if you really liked it, it's just too hard to remember that much. But what people will remember is how you felt. That was cool. Wow, I want to learn more. I want to get better at this. Oh, I can see how that relates to my life. I'm going to go back and read more about it. That's actually the real function of a talk, is to inspire you to do that follow-up.
You know, I wanted to give a shout out. One of my favorite speakers is Dr. Eddie Chang.
Okay.
So he always starts out, his talk is very technical.
Yeah.
But he always starts out with a human story.
Yeah.
Bringing up a patient, describing who that person is, what they're like, their personality, their interests, and then describes the impact of what that injury was. And then he dives into the technical, making it very, very easy to follow, and then he wraps it up again, closing it out, sandwiching it with the human story behind the work. And it always kind of makes that scientific work, has that human translation to it
relatable.
that makes it, you walk out with a feel-good, hopeful feeling of where the work is going, but also convinced by the data that he shows.
Yeah, perfect example. I'm in medicine, right? It's a very classic technique. It doesn't work for every domain, but very often you start a medicine science talk with like a patient story. Here's a patient I saw in clinic, and they were suffering from this terrible disease, and we had to show like, what are we going to do about it? That begs the question, what did you do about it, right? People want to know what's next in the story. Well, I studied this thing, I invented this treatment, I did whatever, and then even better when you have this callback, you close the story, and let me tell you what did happen to this person. This thing happened, and things were better off. It's a great way to close it out. And I did get my PhD at the end, right? I didn't die. I could have saved that as a punchline. Other thoughts? Think about what you want to comment on. Another anecdote just to motivate you, right? Which what I'm really trying to do. You're all very smart. I don't need to teach you everything. I need to encourage you to learn on your own. Warren Buffett gave a talk to a bunch of business school students many years ago, and he says, I don't know how many of your students, I think many of your students, right? And I wonder if a lot of you feel really poor. You didn't even know what a $100 bill was, right? You feel very poor as a student, right? He said, all these students, I would happily give you $100,000 right now if you give me 1% of your future earnings. And it would totally be worth it, because you're poor now, you're gonna make plenty of money over the course of your life. He said, and by the way, if you're a good public speaker, I'll double that, and it'll be totally worth it. Which is a very strange thing. You have such this good, strong technical or foundational experience and value, but when you can also communicate that, it's just a huge amplifying effect on your career and your life.
So you mentioned that you shake when you get nervous, and you mentioned that you pass out that one time. But what if you hyperventilate? I'm gonna be real. I had an experience where I was criticized for my work, and then I was answering the question, that I realized I couldn't breathe.
Yeah. And
because I was missing a part of the data, and so I just remember my mind was spiraling.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I just couldn't breathe. And then my PI was like, breathe, and I just ended up like I had to excuse myself from the room
Okay.
and,
Okay.
and follow up again, and that was like one of the worst experiences I've ever had. I didn't pass out, but I just.
Well, you can see where it was headed.
Yeah.
You were probably, I was like, I'm gonna power through this.
I
That was not
couldn't
right.
breathe. I couldn't breathe, and I was choking upon my words.
Wow.
And then I just got like really cold, and then that's when I had to like leave and then come back. And he was just like, "You're just missing data. It's okay." It's like,
Mhm.
like you just report. That's what happened.
Mhm.
It's okay, right? And so I guess I wanted to know, what do you do when you hyperventilate in front of your VP and your PI?
Yeah.
Because that's what I struggle with.
Yeah. It's kind of actually sounds like in that moment you probably actually did the right thing. It's like, just step away. It's fine. Everyone's just a human at the end of the day. Even your VP, even the CEO of the hospital, even there's a person, right? And people understand that. In fact, sometimes that's relatable. So it sounds like in that moment you actually probably did the right thing. Like, just step away, recompose, and come back and regroup.
Is there career repercussions for that?
If that happens every time, you probably don't get invited back. If it happened one time, oh, it was fine. People still laugh at me with that PhD story. Whatever, I'm a faculty at Stanford now. I'm doing fine. Like it's okay. Nobody died. But having said that, it is some of this calibration which I was trying to do because it's a real thing. A lot of people, let alone which slide to use, it's just panic-inducing to talk in front of people, and literally they ask you a question and you feel instantly defensive. One thing that helped me, especially if you do science, here's a nice manipulative way to say it. In science, a scientist express their interest in your work by beating you up about it, by grilling you about it. If they really thought your work was stupid, they would just tune out and answer their email. The fact that they're grilling you, they're saying, your work is so important, that's really good, I want to make sure this is done right, tell me more about it, right? They're actually expressing how much they care about your work.
That wasn't my case, but thanks for
Well, it depends on different circumstances, but I sometimes I say that to myself just to rationalize. Oh, it just means if nobody's mad about what you do, you're probably not working on anything that important. Like, oh, it just means what I'm doing is important, and so I should expect to get beaten up and get grilled on some things. And also, if you're doing science, which is a lot of what I do now, also like science is never finished. You never have enough data. You never have all the results. If you did, you're doing a homework problem. You're not really doing science, right? And once you reassure by that, it's helpful because I've just had more years. I realize, yeah, I don't have the answer to that. I'll probably have it next year. Whatever, I'll just do it next year. When you're a student, you feel like, oh my gosh, this is my one chance to prove myself or I die. It's like, no, you're fine. Your progress so far, and you're looking forward to a whole career going forward of doing more. I know it's easier said than done in reality, but also I have stepped aside and done breathing. There's actually a medical concept. You're inducing a vagal reaction to suppress your heart rate when that happens. There's other techniques. You can like squeeze yourself here. You can like pinch yourself. You could take a beta blocker. You don't have to. It's just like you're lifting a weight, and that actually will suppress your heart rate when you feel like you're panicking.
So this is not exactly on your topic, but when I was in grad school, we would have lab meetings, and we would take turns presenting our data, and then the whole team would be grilling you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Explain this fact. What do you do? Why did you do it this way? And some groups take that a little bit too far.
Yeah.
And especially, I think, for women, if your tone of voice is not really confident, if you have a small voice or whatever, they feel like they need to toughen you up. And that can be very stressful.
Yeah.
And I think a certain amount of it, if you feel like it really is too much, you need to give someone that feedback. Like,
Yeah.
not at the moment, you don't want to start, fighting with people, but privately to your PI or whoever is safe.
I like that.
Just say, I want to do a good job, I want to communicate my science, I appreciate the feedback, but could you deliver it maybe a little more gently, or, so you're not gonna go commit Harry Carey or something after your lab meeting. And people can get really distressed, and it's not fair, so.
Fantastic. Happy to hang around for discussion. I think we're at the hour, so people need a break and get back home.
Yes, and thank you so much for hosting this. I think this is definitely something that all of us can implement in our work, our studies, and thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all for having me here. It was really great group here. Looking forward to seeing what you can do next. Very good. Thank you all.
This is for you.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Your $20, your 20 hours of hard work will get a reward.
It's good. They're
Yeah,
good.
that's
They're good. It works
lifetime
out.
they're
The
going to
real
forgive
reward is when you all feel better and you do a great job. That's actually very, very gratifying, and that's why I'm at the university.
Yeah,
So
give everybody time.
So it's actually better not having doctors make the decision, but like the research that you're presenting.
It's provocative. The New York
Really?
Times, Washington Post covered that study. They had very opposite headlines.
Really?
It's
Do you think
probably
it's
more
the
complicated.
critical thinking that was too much?
There's some. It's one thing is like AI is getting shockingly good, better than you would expect it to be, but also it means like humans, they don't even know how to use it. A third of those doctors didn't even know what a chatbot was. They didn't know how to use it.
Oh, my question is, how did you use the 20 hours to prepare this? Is there like a breakdown?
Most of that 20 hours was me watching other videos, was me reading documents. It's like, what am I even going to talk about? A talk about talks? Like, there's literally, Matt Abrams has like a quarter-long course on that, but I'm not going to spend 10 hours covering 60 things. But what are the 60 things that I could talk about? And then I whittled that down, and then I decided to pick about 3 or 4. So most of the time was just collating, deciding what to do. It's that kind of a thought, kind of conception process. Making the slides was deliberately not that much, because also I made a very deliberate effort to have very little stuff on my slides, right? The instinct is you have bullet points. Bullet point. I'm just gonna read the bullet points, and that'll be my talk. But like, no, that's definitely the wrong thing to do. I had those bullet points, but they went to my notes section, which is an accompanying image, and what can I say along that? And then there was a few hours just practicing, just doing it a couple times with the video. Most of the time was just deciding what to say that actually matters a lot. The content still matters more than the delivery, but it is shocking how much the delivery impacts. My father just done a comment where I really like your thing with the lab and individual feedback. If someone individual is really a nasty situation, totally fair situation, and it's like, that's a great question. I'm not totally sure. Maybe could we talk about this offline? And when I had a chance to think about it more, that's a complex question. That is a fair way to. It's kind of a cop out, but it's an acceptable one. It just gets you out of a bad, nasty situation. And if it's escalating and someone's like beating you up kind of inappropriately, depending on the environment, almost certainly the entire audience is on your side and they really don't like the heckler. So if it really got into an escalating situation, you're the captain of the ship. You're the director of stage play. Thanks so much. This sounds like a much deeper conversation than I can't resolve right in this moment. I really want to think about it more, so give me a thought response. Let's talk about it later. The audience is going to be on your side. They're not going to be on the heckler side. They're going to be annoyed at the heckler for beating you up. So feel empowered by that for what that's worth. I don't know. Would you say differently?
No, I think that's right. I mean, I really think one of the most basic points that you made is that most people would rather, I don't know what your example was, but rather do anything, than give a talk.
Yeah.
And my personal anecdote was I got a job teaching after grad school at a college. So I had 3 or 4 classes and they met almost every day. I was in the bathroom for a half an hour before the first class for about 3 weeks. I would be in the bathroom. I'll be like, not hyperventilating, but just it's a great way to lose weight, I guess.
What's gonna happen?
Oh my God. But after that, I settled down and it was cool. It was great. But it's definitely the practice, getting people to listen to you and getting comfortable answering questions. Otherwise, it is nerve-wracking. People say they'd rather have a root canal than give a public.
Yeah, if you ask what people are afraid of, most people would say they have a greater fear of talking than the deaf. I'll bring up. I'll just give you an example of a spreadsheet. This is kind of an extreme example, but I learned this from a magic book again, but now I've applied to my public speaking as well. Is every time I do a magic, every time I give a talk, I have a log to myself, a spreadsheet. When did it happen? Who did I talk to? What was the setting? What was the topic? And how did it go? Anything good? Anything bad? And this is not for any. I don't show this to anybody. This isn't for anybody. This is notes to myself. So for one thing, I can methodically get better, right? Oh, that was pretty good, but I probably didn't articulate as well as I wanted to. I'm gonna catch it next time. This time I hyperventilated, so let me think about that next time. So it's accruing that, and also I think what it's doing for me, I don't know if it works for you, is it's not like any one talk is life and death. It's showing me there's a long series. None of them are gonna be perfect. That's okay, because I just need to help me get better at the next one, at the next one, at the next one, and not worry too much about any particular one. And my PhD thesis, before that, I was talking to my advisor. He's like, man, this is crazy. Been studying for 5 years. It all comes down to this one day. Like, everything depends on this one hour presentation. That's crazy. My advisor's like, what are you talking about? This 1 hour presentation doesn't matter. It's nothing to do with anything. Nobody cares. You get your PhD not for that presentation. You get PhD for the last 5 years of work you've been doing. This thing is just a formality. I'm like, oh, okay. It's just different perspective.
Do you think your MD is easier than your PhD?
Different. Very, 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 very different. MD is very protocolized and just kind of stamina. PhD is more creative and open.
Which one's the more fun one?
Different. PhD you get a little more free and flexible, but you also feel like, does anything I do matter? Does anybody care? What's the point of this? I don't know why I'm even bothering. Does anyone even know what I'm doing? It can have a broader impact. Versus MD is very exhausting physically, but also you go home and you have very good stories to tell. This is actually why I actually didn't want to be a doctor. I kind of still more on you. You know, after your PhD work, you go home and you tell your spouse, oh, and then the reviewer number 2 wrote this stupid comment. The printer didn't work, and then I had to deal with this open access fee. The IRB gave me some grief. Right? It's just like paperwork. You talk about paperwork on your stories. When you're a doctor, you come like, dude, I saw this patient, right? And then like they have this giant like sarcoma, like their whole arm was cancer. They had to chop the whole thing off. And when you tell a story like that, people say, whoa, what happened next? When you talk about your IRB story, people are like, I'm sorry to hear that. Anyway, this is nothing about giving talk now, just different dynamics. Anything you do can be very important and compelling and just make it matter to what you want to do. All right, thanks everybody.
Excellent.
Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.